Hey, I'm Jackson Lanzing.
And I'm Collin Kelly.
And you are listening to the Captain America Comic Book Fans Podcast.
Well, Happy New Year, Cap fans, and welcome to another episode of the Captain America Comic Book Fans Podcast. This is Rick Verbanis, and we are into episode 169, if you can believe it. And as always, I'm joined by the best gosh darn co-host out there. That is one Mr. Bob Lucius. Oh, Bob. Well, you know, we all want to change the world. But when you talk about destruction, don't you know that you can count me out? You say you got a real solution. Well, you know, we'd all love to see the plan. You ask me for a contribution. Well, you know, we're all doing what we can. You say you want a revolution.
All right. Okay. I know from secondhand that this has got to be a Beatles song, right?
It is a Beatles song. Yes. I threw the lyrics a little out of order because I didn't want to quite give it away. But I picked the ones that I thought were pertinent because Bob, I don't know. Why am I greeting you with a Beatles song, Revolution?
Well, would it have anything to do with the fact that our guests tonight have been intimately involved with a recent series that had a lot to do with a very New World Order sort of arc with one of the characters, a beloved character, going by the name of the Revolution?
It's indeed true. Yes. So that would be James Buchanan Barnes, a.k.a. Bucky, a.k.a. Winter Soldier, aka now known as the Revolution. So yeah, we're talking today with the writers who gave him that name, and that is Jackson Lanzing and Collin Kelly. They're coming back to the show for a third time, and you know, it's going to be fun talking about them because they have a new book out called The Thunderbolts. It's a new series, and it's a lot of the same characters that we saw from their time on Captain America Sentinel of Liberty. So we thought, listen, it's the same characters. We're following along a lot of the same storyline. We got to have them back on.
Yeah. And like Rick, this is getting to be like SNL, right? Where we have there's a certain hierarchy of guests that have guest hosted SNL, and you know, it becomes very rarefied as you get to the top ranks. I mean, like the likes of Steve Martin and Alec Baldwin and gosh, who else?
Did you ever see the skit where Alec Baldwin was hosting and Steve Martin was there, and they went into like a side room, like kind of like a bar, and they're waiting to go on, and Steve Martin kept trying to like poison him so that he couldn't get out there and host. Did you ever see that?
Yeah,
that's really funny. I mean, you could probably just YouTube that. And there's a cameo by Martin Short, who comes up and he's like the waiter delivering drinks, and Steve Martin's like sad.
It's getting to be that way on our show. A few folks have been a couple times, right? But now we got a three-peat.
Yeah, well, you know, I do think that Jason Olsen might argue with you. Wasn't he a three-peat?
I think you're right. He might be a three-peat as well.
Yeah. He was the first three-peat. So he might be poisoning Jackson and or Collin as far as, so that's kind of funny. But anyway, Happy New Year. If you're listening when this episode comes out, it's January 3rd, 2024. And we just celebrated our 3-year anniversary of this podcast. Hard to believe. Bob, it's 2024. Any New Year's resolutions?
You know, Rick, I've been thinking about that. You know, and I've decided I'm gonna try not to work as much. So I know that will come as a surprise to you.
It's the least you could do.
Yeah. I've been thinking about this, and I've been working too much. You know, because I have my day job, and then I teach at the university, and you know, of course, I got a family too, just as you do, and you know, there's only so much time in the day, and I haven't been taking care of myself well, so I need to make some time to do that. Stop working through lunch, and you know, stop working on the weekends and nights and stuff like that, and you know, draw some boundaries around my work life balance. So that's going to be my resolution for 2024.
I like that. I do. I like that. A little self-care.
I think everybody has to like sort of step back and think about that, you know, and I'll tell you, my wife and I have these conversations a lot, because she's kind of tuned in. You know, she works for city government, but she used to be a trainer that went out and did corporate trainings and trainings for municipal government. And one of the things that always seems to interest people are generational differences. And you know, there's this you know, sometimes it's all in good nature, sometimes it's not, sometimes it's a bit more critical about sort of younger generations and how they, you know, they're not the same as boomers or even Gen X when it comes to you know, their commitment to the corporate world or corporate life, or the expectations of you know, previous generations around, you know, well, you go work, you know, 9 to 5, suck it up and just do it. They are much more attuned to work-life balance and much more demanding when it comes to work-life balance. And we talk about this a lot. And over the course of, you know, talking about this over a year, you know, I'm actually a lot more, I have a lot more admiration for that. I think that's important. And I think a lot of us do get caught up in it, that like, we got to bring home the paycheck and do whatever it takes. But sometimes it's more than just what it takes, right? We just get so wrapped up in our work, and it becomes a big part of who we are, to the exclusion of who we are. Right. And
yeah,
I think
sure.
we can all stand to like step back a little bit and take a look at that work-life balance, and maybe carve out a little extra time for self-care and family care and things like that.
Yeah. So I agree with you. I mean, because Bob, you are not getting any younger. And so I think it's a good thing for you. And by the way, for me, I totally disagree with you 100%. It has nothing to do with the fact that my boss or colleagues could be listening right now. In fact, when we get off doing this, I'm getting back on the computer and answering work email.
I noticed all those papers spread around your desk. Like
yeah, like absolutely. I might even take a work call while we're talking with Jackson and Collin. Yeah,
right,
yeah. So, no, I hear you. You
got any? What are you gonna? You know, you got a long list there. I see you got like a pad of paper. Is that your list of resolutions?
Yes, those are the ones that my wife wrote for me. And no, I've been saying this for a while now. I feel like a broken record. I need to lose some weight, man. I realized this because you know, it was like towards the end of the summer I started putting on the pounds, and you know, most people, you know, they look at me and they're like, really, you know, whatever. But I'm like, you have no idea what clothes I can't fit into right now.
Yeah.
And I realized this, you know, in the last few weeks, month or so. And it's like, I got to do something about it. Yeah. So it's really hard to do it during the holidays, counting calories, and you know, you try to make better choices, but you know, you got to do better than just make better choices. So I'm going to be getting back onto this little calorie counter that I have and start logging my food. I got to make better choices with my food and my drinks. And that's a major resolution for me.
Yeah. I think I share that. You know, I don't know if I told you this, but a few weeks ago I went through I had to have an upper GI, you know, endoscopy.
Yeah.
And I haven't had my follow-up yet with the doc, but when he came in, of course, I'm still half under the spell of amnesia, not anesthesia. Amnesia.
See, you can't even remember.
I can't remember what the hell. But he came in and he told me, okay, you got this, you got some gastritis, inflammation of your stomach lining, probably what's been causing you some discomfort. And you got, I think, he said I had a hiatal hernia, which is like up near the esophagus where it goes into the stomach. And I can't remember if he said, you need surgery or you don't need surgery. So I'll find out. This would be a nice big surprise for you, like a New Year's surprise. But the other thing, I thought he said, now it doesn't make any sense to me, but I thought he said you could lose some weight. Now it might have been the drugs talking. It could have been the anesthesia talking, but I don't know because that's something I'll have to follow up with him as well. Because but I came home and I told my son that, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I get that."
Shut up, kid.
So yeah, so I may have to lose a few pounds, be back on the 10-pound sprint or something.
Do we dare do the contest again, Bob?
I'm not doing the contest again.
It's been 2 years.
No, I'm not doing the contest again. But it's all part of the self-care, right? Like I need to like step away from the desk and I used to go for a walk every day at lunch. I work in a beautiful area. I can go for a hike, at lunch. I need to do that more. And it all goes together, right? Eating better, taking some time to get some exercise and lowering the stress, man. Just stop worrying about so much.
Yeah, I hear you, Bob. I hear you about lowering the stress. In fact, I've been thinking of taking some of these podcast chores and putting them on someone else's plate.
Yeah, you should do that. Absolutely. Let me see. We should advertise it in the group.
Okay, I hear what you're saying. Anyway, so Bob, another resolution I have is that on January 27th, I don't do something to embarrass myself.
Yeah.
Because that is when you and I finally meet in person for the first time.
That's right.
All right. We're going to be going to the Original Art Expo down in Orlando, Florida, or up Orlando, Florida for you.
That's right. Yeah.
And so, yeah, I need to make sure that I don't do anything that you're like, Rick, I'm sorry, I can't do this podcast anymore with you.
Shuffle the clown. I met my wife back when we were dating. She went to China and she came home from China, and I met her at the airport in San Francisco. And I had on a huge afro clown wig and a red nose at the baggage claim. So with a big sign, big handwritten sign. So
and she's like, I don't know who that person is.
Yeah, something about picking her up for her admission to clown college or something. But anyway, yeah.
How old were you?
Oh, we were. We weren't young because this was a grad school. So I was probably 34, 34. So
nice.
Yeah.
Nice. I would love to say that we've got a new review to cover, but we still don't. I don't know what's going to take people. Go on Apple, give us 5 stars, leave us a comment, and we will do it here. And I will even do it in any voice you tell me. How about that for some sort of I guess that really isn't some sort of
even a British woman despite his misgivings.
Oh, I don't even want to go there. Birthdays, Bob. There is one birthday. Don Heck actually celebrated a birthday yesterday, or he would have celebrated a birthday yesterday. He passed away back in 1995 at the age of 66. But Don Heck was a longtime illustrator, comic book illustrator, mostly known for doing the Avengers. So he certainly did a lot of Captain America and the Avengers. And then I think he did a couple of Captain America. Like he did like an annual or something like that, but mostly he did Cap in the Avengers, which is where he had his longest run. And then he also did a ton of Thor and Iron Man and so on. So, happy belated birthday to Don Heck.
Indeed, a real talent.
All right. Speaking of talent, we should be letting Jackson and Collin out of the green room and get to our conversation with them.
Yeah, let's do that.
So we're here with Jackson Lanzing and Collin Kelly, aka the Hive Mind. Welcome back to the show, guys. Hard to believe it's been 11 months, almost to the day, since we've had you on, and you were talking about your first arc of Sentinel of Liberty and giving us a sneak peek into the Cold War crossover, and a lot has happened since then.
Hasn't it just?
Thank you so much for having us back. It is, I didn't realize that. How delightful. My goodness, what a year can bring.
Actually, I was really heartened to hear that you had Alana Smith on to chat about the book. Well, I actually listened to that podcast because I was as interested in the sort of how that was being framed as anything. I think all of that whole process was such a like simultaneously a thing that we, coming onto Captain America was so impactful for us. It was such a beautiful thing. We were so thankful to be there and really like glad to be able to tell our story. And then for a legend, like for a writer of the magnitude as JMS, right? A writer who like Collin and I both owe a huge amount to. I've been showing off my Babylon 5 Blu-ray collection all week to everybody who will show me because it finally arrived. Like, we love JMS. So having him come in with his own take and his own thing and to really push that forward, it meant that we had to be a little bit creative about how we kept on doing Captain America. And I don't know if Thunderbolts had been announced at the time that you interviewed Alana, but it really felt like Thunderbolts became our way to say, hey, we love what we're doing in Captain America. How can we keep that going, and how can we keep a good portion of that plot alive that maybe isn't going to fit into what JMS wants to do, and rightfully so. Can we, take this and build, our own space?
Yeah,
it's been fun to do.
So before we get into questions on your final story of For Sentinel Liberty, so let's get that out of the way. Let's how your run ended. At what point were you told your run was ending? How did you react? And when were you told you could launch Thunderbolts?
Those two things were basically simultaneous. It wasn't far off. I think we knew around the beginning of Cold War that we weren't going to go another year. And we'd always, at Marvel, you never know what's going to happen. You always write for your order, which is something we've really learned and embraced on Guardians of the Galaxy, and certainly are embracing on Thunderbolts. But on Cap, we sort of had an alt option. We could have gone for another year, or we could have stuck around. And we sort of knew that was up to the publishing line and where things were going and what editorial was interested in doing. And ultimately, I think, just you get sales numbers, you get the feedback you get the decisions that you get from much further above our pay grade. And you, as a writer, it's kind of your responsibility in this particular context to go with it and find your way through it and build something exciting that you can, be proud of. And so I think pretty much immediately after hearing like, hey, I think this is going to be the end for both of these books. Tochi and us, we were all told at the same time, like Sentinel and Symbol are both going to end at the same time. We're going to build out this Cold War. We're going to do these finales. Here's how we're going to do it. And they laced it all in. And then I think we were able to take probably a week before we just went back and said, great, can we have Bucky? Is everybody Bucky? What about Sharon? Do they have big plans for Sharon? Because we just did this Destroyer thing. Could we run that forward? And fortunately, there was an appetite for that. Fortunately, both because I think of what was going to be movie synergy before the strikes, and also because of, truthfully, a desire to see that plot move forward. Marvel liked the Revolution. They liked the Outer Circle. They like the Destroyer. They backed us doing that the whole way. I think they've been interested in those ideas. So it was great for us to be able to have a place to build them out. And I think that's really what Thunderbolts got to become, is like, in being a bit of a quote unquote smaller book. Like, it's not like it's not Captain America. In building that out, I think there was kind of a sense of freedom that we wouldn't necessarily have had in like an A-list book.
And I think, when we first got the news, obviously no one loves to get that news, but you can kind of take it in a few different ways, right? Like, obviously what we know, you guys know Alana. Yeah, you heard from her. Like, she is not someone who doesn't love all of her books. She would love this book to have gone 10,000 years, but obviously there are things beyond our control. So after you kind of get that, you go through a little bit of your grieving process. And during that, we certainly talked with some other more established writers. You kind of talk with people and you kind of solicit their opinion. And I remember, no needs to be named names, but like there's a certain perspective. Sometimes if your book gets canceled, screw them, right? End on a cliffhanger, right? Like end in some way that's going to give them show the audience, make them hungry, make them say, man, I wish we could have always gotten more. And that leads them excited for perhaps the next time you come to the character, right? And Jack and I, that's just not how we work, right? Like maybe it's a poor move politically, but to us, you get a chance to end your story, you end your story. They were cool enough to be able to give us, we asked for not only the short we did in 750, which kind of the funeral for Roger, but also the finale issue, that oversized, super juicy final issue to kind of close out our story, because it was really important that the fans, the people who love this, who are reading it really on board, and Lord knows, there are a lot of fans of this run. Every convention we do, there are people who are coming up saying, this is the run that got me into Captain America. And that fills our hearts. That is exactly what we have always wanted to hear.
It's an insane thing to hear. It's an
insane thing to hear. And then we say, have you read Mr. Brubaker's work? But knowing that was going to be our closing coda, and we got a chance to land the plane, we knew that we absolutely wanted people to be able to point to this and say, this was our run. It's a full story. You can wrap your teeth around it. That's what you do with teeth, right? You can wrap your teeth around it. You can really get that full meal, but in our minds, perhaps eminent hubris, we see it as kind of chapter 1, perhaps, of where this saga might be going. And we don't know exactly where it might be going, but we do love these characters. And it is our absolute intention now that our claws are sunk into them, that we continue to tell stories with them.
Yeah, first of all, I want to get into that little story in 750, as you put it, but you know what? I never really thought about it the way you put it, that, you get that notice and you're like, I'm going to leave them on a cliffhanger. I never really gave that much thought, but kudos to the two of you to not let your, the readers have that cliffhanger, because you guys build up a huge cliff. It was a mountain, right? It was a huge, like, this was not a cliff. This was a mountain. And quite frankly, to get to the point where you could give us some resolution that we all desperately wanted to see between Steve and Bucky. Kudos to you guys for pushing for that.
I think it didn't require a lot of pushing for what it's worth. I think we pushed on that ourselves. I think Lana was aligned in that regard with us as well. I think there's been a general sense on that book that we all wanted to end it really definitively and put those pieces down, mostly because it honestly felt, the alternative feels like such a potential for there's the opportunity for the writer to come in 5-10 years down the line on a different book and pick up the Outer Circle if we don't do what we did. But we had to put that down. We set up all those characters. I feel like if we just been like, oh, and now the Marvel Universe gets to have them, and if you want to play with the Outer Circle, they're out there and they're doing their thing. That's how a lot of these stories work. I don't think it's a mistake. I don't think it's necessarily like a bad thing. But I think that in this particular context, like you put it, it would have just robbed closure from the whole thing, because if they were still out there, Bucky wouldn't stop. So because of Bucky, for like character focused reasons, we had to end this line. Like we had to end this story. We had to put most of the Outer Circle either in the grave or in the dungeons of Doctor Doom to like truly put them away so that we could put that next step on Bucky. And once we realized that, and once we sort of had that synergy with Marvel, that we could do this as a Bucky series and really do this as a way to hone in on what James is going through and how that affects his friends, his allies, his rivals, his lovers, how all of that stuff gets affected, and use Thunderbolts as a framework for that. Then once we realized that, then it was like, great, everything else can go to bed because we know that we're going to pick this up, and then pop in the most iconic antagonist in Captain America's entire arsenal, the Red Skull. So that
we're going to get to that.
so that we can really properly make this feel like a Cap universe book. Because that was, for what it's worth, Alana's whole sell at the very beginning of this was she wanted Sentinel and Symbol to be the beginning of what you could do with a Cap line. What does it look like to have Cap affiliated books? That it's not just Captain America, but there are other teams or books that are associated with that. What is that? How can we make that universe out in the Marvel universe the same way that the X line has become the X line? Cap is contained within the Avengers line, but he can be more than that. And so this was kind of a cool opportunity to be like, well, Thunderbolts is kind of already a Cap aligned book because of Zemo. Why not just sub out the kid he blew up in a rocket as the lead and see how that works?
One last tag on there, because I do want people to really understand something that is really important to us too, and it's something that we are seeing as we mature as writers, honestly, and start to become part of this larger Marvel fan base, right? That we have this incredible community that's looking at what we're doing. We realized that if we break something, we must put it back together. Like, it is incredibly important that you don't get a reputation of breaking things and walking away. That is the height of hubris, because breaking things is cool, right? Oh my God, they're never going to be friends again. What a hook! What a cliffhanger! What a great way to draw readers in. But if you don't actually bring them back together, if you don't actually resolve that conflict, then it's really a cheap gag. So we knew that even though this story was going to be about turning Steve and Buck really back against each other, right? Having Bucky go through that heel turn to kind of find that original conflict between the two of them, we always knew that we would need to be bringing them back together. And we could have done that in 100 stories. We did it in this length. And I think it all comes down to the hug, right? We're two best friends who write about being best friends. And we refuse to take characters that we love and leave them in positions of heartbreak. It's really important that we close those emotional circles to us, just as both men and writers.
I'm not even going to say anything on top of that. That's exactly right. Totally.
All right. So let's talk about how the Cold War storyline and the series ended. So one of the things we discussed previously was your goal to set up a conflict that had two friends, Steve and Bucky, in conflict with two completely fundamentally different viewpoints. The scene with the two of them at Roger's funeral in 750, I'm not going to lie, it made Bob shed some ugly tears. But maybe I got a little choked up. Do you feel like you accomplished your goal of the overall story, even with the sudden decision to cut it shorter than expected?
Absolutely.
We got Bob's tears. We always say all we wanted Bob's tears.
All we wanted was Bob's tears. Yeah, huzzah! I really feel like we nailed it. No, look, I don't think we can ever ask or answer properly the question like, do you think you did it, guys? Like, I'll reread an issue 100 times and tell you 100 ways that it's bad or that it's good. I will be my own biggest fan and my own worst critic, and Collin well knows his worst fan and his worst critic all at the same time, right? So like we're very I don't know if I can make like a qualitative judgment. What I can say is it all felt the whole time like Bucky and Steve were never even in question. That writing those characters was just like following a truth, which might sound very holistic and kind of witchy, but like that's really what it was. It was like these characters are so iconic and fundamental. And it really is, again, I know we say this a lot, but like credit Brubaker for taking Bucky Barnes and finding a way to like make him into this character who is simultaneously Bucky Barnes and also this entire other level of like moral complexity and trauma that in being Steve Rogers' best friend brings out such interesting stuff in him, right? So what we got to do is just mine that vein and really look at like what happens when you hurt that relationship and when you bring it back together. And I think you just end up with some really beautiful moments there at the end. I'm so thankful that we got Roger's funeral. I'm so sad Roger had to die. I love Roger Aubrey so much, and I love the Sharon Carter plot, and I'm there was no other ending for that character. It had to happen the way it did. It was, again, it was sort of like following a truth. Nothing else feels like it would land at the moment. and you get there and you get there with the character and he feels like he's on his last ride, and these characters feel like they need to have this conversation, and it all comes together into this like really lovely moment, and then Carmen Carnero draws it.
That's the magic trick. That's genuinely the magic trick. Did we write the ever loving shit out of that? Yes. We really worked to grind that script into the best possible version that we could produce. And then we deleted 90% of it and handed it to Carmen and just let her draw. And
actually true. We pulled a lot of dialogue out of that script.
Because when you have a talent like that, when she fundamentally understands the kind of the impact that just a look can bring to the table, you get out of the fucking way.
Yeah, I almost had a feel because there was a lot of panels there with no dialogue, right? Until Bucky says he's sorry. It almost had a feel of DeMatteis and Giffen letting Kevin McGuire do his facial expressions, in Justice League. It's just get out of the way, let the artist do that.
I think we really owe DeMatteis and Giffen a huge, obviously our careers owe them a huge debt of gratitude. We've worked on characters, both have had iconic runs on it. It's really like both are icons to us. They're just funnier than us. My thing is always like, oh, I go to their work and it's like, oh, I don't really see us in them because they're so funny and we aren't. But
we're funny looking.
Yeah, exactly.
And also before
we'll send you the director's cut. We'll send you V1 of that script, and you'll be like, "Goodness,
no, we won't.
We won't." But
you just teased.
Features some very juicy monologues that just weren't needed.
Yeah,
and that, as a writer, that's the best feeling.
Wrote that issue in a really like wild week of our lives, and that was the week my house burned down. Was
my
what?
So that funeral ended up, I had a house fire and my house burned down. I was at Emerald City Comic Con. So anybody who's in Emerald City probably knows this. And then I came home a few days later and the house had been, Collin was in LA being incredible and helping my wife deal with this, chaos. Oh, wow. And I came back, and the next week, the first script that was due was 750. And it was like a very, we've said like we split up the work and we kind of like Collin wrote the entire first side of the Bucky side and I wrote the funeral, and then we wrote each other. And ultimately I look back at that and it's like that scene was a very like personal bit of like the funeral scene was like a really personal bit of writing, trying to like get at losing something and not really having control over losing it, like not wanting to lose it but losing it anyway, and what that was like. That sort of immediacy of grief that I was going through at the time. And then I got the enormous personal gratitude of getting to see the best Bucky Steve conversation of the book all coming through Collin, which I would have been completely incapable of even touching at that point in time. Like, I think that issue is actually a really good demonstration of how the hive mind works. Like, it's how we work. It's like, I kind of needed to write a funeral and Collin kind of needed to write the end of this for like the re-beginning of this friendship. And we brought those two things to the table and turned it into an issue of comics. And that's not really necessarily something a single writer can do in the same way. So it was a trip, that issue, but it was a wonderful thing to do. I'm very thankful that Marvel let us do it.
Well, first of all, thank you for giving us a little inside information on the story behind that. And
yeah,
but my goodness, your house burned down. That really I don't want to just gloss over that. That's devastating.
We're okay. We're okay. Everything that's important is okay. We have a new house. We're very happy. It's okay.
Okay.
But readers in history will look back upon our Guardians of the Galaxy run and realize that that entire 11 issues is in a lot of ways Jackson processing the fact that a lot of his life went up in smoke and a fire, and that is the refrain of our entire Guardians of the Galaxy run. Completely opposite. We started, unintentionally, we started that book before fire, but what are the Guardians if not a fire is kind of, and a fire only ends one way.
Is the refrain of that book. What they wrote was a fire, and the fire only ends one way. And then about 2 months later, my house burned down, and it was very like, it was like, great. Comics is a place where that's going to have to get processed. And because our work ultimately is personal and we try to put ourselves into it. So I think part of that became about that. Now the Guardians have dealt with that in their own way. Talking about breaking pieces and putting them back together again. So it was a crazy time, but we're really happy to be on the other side of it. And, my wife is happy. I'm happy. Our cat is thrilled. She has more places to run. Like everything's fine.
Oh my goodness. So I really enjoyed the letter that you wrote to the readers at the end of the finale. It was a bit of a passing of the baton. And we've covered a few similar letters over the years, over the decades from previous writers. And those are not to build it up too much, but those are studied, by subsequent generations of readers, right? I mean, the subject of books in some cases. So but you basically in the letter you challenged the readers to carry out Steve lessons, the lessons that they learned from Steve, to forgive loved ones, to stand up for oppression. At the end of the day, is that your hope as writers, for the lessons of people to take away from your writing? And did writing Steve Rogers make it easier or harder for you to follow Steve's lessons?
Oh, what a great question. Because I think we've said this before, and it is so weirdly true. In a lot of ways, I think writing Steve Rogers made us better people. Which is you can't write Steve authentically unless you understand Steve, right? The character is too important for you to half-ass. So in order to get inside his head, you really need to start putting yourself in this unique place of the right thing, which is such a weird amorphous concept, except Steve Rogers always knows what it is. I think that was the thing that we were thinking of. It's like, be like Steve, be like Captain America, of course, but no, be like Steve Rogers, because he has a moral center to himself that not only uplifts himself, but uplifts all the people around him.
I think the thing about Steve Rogers, he's the first, and maybe to this point only time, we've written a superhero that I am not cynical about. I think it's very easy to be cynical about Batman. And if people want to know about that, they can read Outsiders. I think it's really easy to be cynical about Iron Man. In fact, he's built on cynicism. Obviously, the Guardians of the Galaxy are fundamentally cynical. They're all like, and in a goopy way, like in a gushy, heartfelt way. They're a bunch of characters who come from like these like crazy criminal circumstances and traumatized circumstances who are turning around and trying to be heroes. So they have kind of this like screw up thing. Thunderbolts the same way. Steve Rogers, like, I would be happy if he existed. I would want him to be in the real world. I would want there to be, I want people to be more like Steve Rogers in my life, which is what superheroes are. I want to be more like that in my life. Like, Steve's one of those characters. There's a few of them. Peter Parker's, I think, the same way, who are, and Thor, actually, in a lot of ways, because gods were this in a lot of ways, like the Norse gods and earlier gods did the same thing. They're patterns of behavior. They're ways of saying, like, here's the kind of person you can be if you are this way. And Steve is like, what if you were righteous? What if you stood up to every oppressor you saw? What if you could tell the difference between somebody who was lying to you and somebody who was telling the truth, and you could always side on the side of truth? Like, Steve his superpower goes really deep, as Collin puts it. It's like being right. And I think I've come through that process, I don't know, wanting there to be more of that in the world. So when we got to writing that letter, which, I mean, was such an honor to do in the first place, like, I think we had to say directly to the readers, like, the reason this is why it's podcasts like this. It's that what would Cap do coin that it's the fandom that's out there. Like, that was us thanking them, because I don't think I need to tell them to act more like Steve Rogers or challenge them to do that. They already do that. I'm just throwing down the challenge coin you guys gave to us, right? Like, I think that's all we're trying to do, is remind the reader of the same thing that we always experience when we read Steve's books, which is a reminder that we can be better, that we can stand up for the weak, that we can stand up for truth, that we can be righteous, and that we can do it without oppressing other people. And we can do it without stepping on bodies. We can do it like with our souls, which Steve somehow does. It's not about the shield, right? It's about the guy.
Mhm.
Wow.
As-
Well, very well put.
As soon as you said that, they're like, aren't they like our modern gods? Somewhere Grant Morrison's ears twitched, and he's about to come crashing into your hotel. Like,
Please,
don't you let
Grant,
me?
please, you're welcome. I summon you. God, anytime.
Well, Colin, you're right. I mean, you said that writing Steve Rogers, help make you a better person. I think, reading good Steve Rogers writing makes us all better people, which is why we do the show, why we do the podcast, why so many people read the book, because
and why we appreciated your run.
yeah,
Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah, help make us better people.
So the
Or
last
aspire to
time
be.
you were
We're all in this together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
the last time you were here, we were talking about the plant yourself like a tree quote. And you both mentioned how you're big fan of JMS, and Jackson, you said Babylon 5 changed your world. I think you said.
I love that one.
Does JMS taking over the character take the sting away just a little?
Absolutely.
100%.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we were obviously, it's fine to admit that we were a little salty, right?
We were curious. We were curious who was taking over.
And we were curious. And then a couple weeks later, Alana slipped us the fact that JMS was taking over. And it's like, my God, you know what, my guys, if you're going to lose a job, fucking lose to the best, right?
It was kind of cool. I told my mom and she got excited. I told my mom, I lost my job. On the other hand, J. Michael Straczynski got my job, and she was like, "Oh my God, you got him before JMS." It was very exciting.
I mean, and so I think we don't need to gush about his talent. I think Rising Stars is one of the seminal Burks.
I can edit that. I can edit that out.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
It's just a real great Burke. But like all of his work is just intensely human and like empathetic. And yes, action-packed, but also just so genuine and if we could become his Padawans, we would do it in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of writers who have had a lot of influence on us, but like he's one of the tops. He's been there pretty much my whole life. Like I was watching and reading JMS stuff very young, and I really, which ages me, but whatever. I really love the sense of like long mythology and world building and clockwork that he brings to his work, and I think we try to do the same thing where we can in a very different way. So yeah.
Well, have you guys?
One of the few people where you send me that email and be like, "Oh, I'm going to read that run," and I like it. So it's like, hooray.
Well, I was going to ask you, have you read the new series at all? Because is there a little bit of pride in seeing some of what you set up that JMS is continuing, like living in his childhood home and stuff like that?
Yep, it's super cool. It's honestly a little surreal. It's very cool. I'm glad to see it happening. I think he's dealing with a lot of similar contexts as he breaks out this Asmodeus arc, and how he's building up the emissary. I think all of this is like, it feels very much in a vein with the kind of stories we felt like you needed to tell with the Outer Circle. So like, I'm psyched to see it because I think he's on a similar wavelength with an extremely different flavor, right? I think the demons are always an interesting thing to throw at Steve Rogers. So I'm excited to see what all of that looks like. That's corruptibility, as we've all been talking about, and like being a good person is such a core part of his mythos. I'm excited to see what JMS does with it. I think it's a great kernel to start from, and obviously he's a legend, so I'm sure he'll be fantastic.
Well, that leads us to a question from one of our patrons. Grant Baugh wants to know, what is something from your Sentinel of Liberty run that you would love to see revisited and expanded upon by a future creative team? So I think Jackson mentioned this previously. Once you put something into the Marvel Universe, it's out there for other writers to use. So is there something that you're hoping will get explored by somebody else?
Yeah, Agboje. Dr. Agboje is there in the canon now for anybody who wants to use him within the past. We know that he is dead, or at least that he appears to have died, but we also know that he seems to have had several families and like been all around and had a lot of secret lives and had to live totally off the grid after escaping his mother, the Machine, and after having sort of leaked the Outer Circle. I think he's a really interesting character. He knows how to shape vibranium in a very specific way. I don't know how you would use him, right? He's not for us. This is like, I'd like to see somebody else figure out if there's some use for that guy. But I think he's an interesting character, and he's there up until the modern Marvel universe. So he can sort of plug into just about anywhere at any age. So he feels like maybe a fun thing to thread up.
How about you, Colin?
I mean, there's a lot of stuff that it would be very cool. I'd love to see like a return to the Outer Circle. I'd love to see if someone's doing some period stories, I'd love to see how they might pop off. But in terms of the one thing that we left on the table that someone else has to use, otherwise we are 100% going to find a way to use it, is Leopold Zola, King of the Monsters. I mean, like, we have left this actualized son of Steve Rogers in the heart of a collapsing mutant dimension with absolute control of that reality. He has a heart of gold and a fist of iron. Like, come on, someone needs to pick this up. He's tailor-made to be someone's iconic villain or a twisted new kind of anti-hero. Who knows? But he's way too cool to not touch. So someone's got to sweep in there and absolutely go crazy.
You just sound like an 80s sitcom. He's got a heart of gold, but a fist of iron.
I easily
coming soon to NBC.
That's honestly, that's how we pitch. No, it really, I think, he's one of those characters that, like, we had planned on spending more time doing. So given how it sort of happens out of Cold War, he's now this thing that is sitting there, and we don't have, like, he's not going to show up in Thunderbolts. We're not touching him for now. And maybe we'll be the guys to do it, because it's an idea we like and a thing that we wanted to play more with. But I'd love to see Steve have to deal with it at some point again, because I do think that it's the person who Ian has, or Leopold, however you want to talk about it, has connection with is Steve. And that's the only way that story is really going to work, unless he's fighting Namor. In which case, bring it on. I want 4 issues of him fighting Namor. I think that would be rad.
Plus, he has his Howling Commandos. He has an army of Cap Wolves.
Great. He's where you get to go for all of your goofy cat monster shenanigans. It's all the stuff that I'm actually not a huge fan of, that Collin kind of got me on page with, and certainly Tochi did too. It's like I've never been a huge Cap Wolf fan. Like, I just as an idea, it's not my favorite thing.
I cannot say that it's a good idea, but it does rip.
Literally.
It is cool as hell.
So getting to play with that has been fun, and I would love to do it again.
All right,
honestly, our answer would be the Destroyer, except we get to use her in Thunderbolts, which is incredible.
Well, let's talk about Thunderbolts. All right. So where did the idea to revisit the series come from? Was that something that you two pitched to Alana, or did she pitch to you?
She pitched it to us. I think we said we would love to keep going with Bucky. Is there a way? And she said Thunderbolts.
Excellent.
I think it was as simple as that.
Question and answered.
All right. So one of the things you mentioned when we first met was when you were discussing Sentinel of Liberty, was you purposely didn't want to do a Red Skull story the first year, but eventually wanted to get to him, because, what Cap writer doesn't want to have a Red Skull story, right? So we're very excited you finally get to tell it. But right there on the cover of Thunderbolts 1, we see a dead Red Skull by the hands of Bucky with the blurb that says, "The Red Skull must die." But then there's that last page, and knowing the hive mind the way we do, is it safe to say there's a lot more to come to this Red Skull story that you've been planning a while?
Yes. I think, well, so there's 4 issues of Thunderbolts to come, and I think that's what that page is, the promise of the rest of the series. And I think Bucky goes into this eyes wide open, right? Bucky is assembling the Thunderbolts with the remnants of the Outer Circle at his fingertips in order to do the kind of work that he feels like needed to have been done over that century and wasn't done because the Outer Circle was playing a game and not saving people and helping people live without the threat of genocide and supervillainy over them at all times. Bucky's done screwing around. He very specifically has learned that he doesn't have Steve's morals and that that's okay. That makes him a different man, but it doesn't make him a lesser man. And now he's going to go do something about it. And it really felt important that we made a statement in that first issue that he wasn't, that these weren't empty promises, that we were going to take something off the board. So I do want to make sure that people are clear based on that last page, that Alexander Lucan is dead. Like, the Alexander Lucan Red Skull is dead. Spoiler alert for Thunderbolts #1. That does not mean the end of the Red Skull any more than the end of any of the other individual echoes of the Red Skull has been the end of the Red Skull. What Bucky is doing is looking at that with eyes wide open, with a century of knowledge about this, and saying, oh, when you kill the Red Skull's resurrection procedures initiate. And when those happen, and they're always different, and they happen at different time scales, and you never know what it's going to be, but there's always some new Red Skull that's ready to come out of the woodwork because, like Hydra, when you kill one, another one takes its place. So we have to go find that. But rather than letting it be a thing that passively happens, he's turning Thunderbolts on it. And he's saying, in issue 1, we're going to kill the Red Skull. And then from issues 2 through 4, we're going to make sure the Red Skull stays dead. And as readers will have already learned in at the end of issue 1, he might be a little late for that. So we'll see how that frames out over the course of the rest of the issues. But that is the promise for Thunderbolts, not necessarily for anything beyond Thunderbolts.
But yeah, can't kill a weed unless you pull it up by the roots. And they've been chopping the top off the Red Skull for too long, and it's time to really get down in the dirt and pull those goddamn roots up.
Nice.
I
that
love
was
the metaphor.
also,
Yeah.
that was the thing that we really, when we did pitch on this project, it was important for us to give a very different flavor than what we just did in Cap. What we wanted to do is hit the ground running. We wanted to do a high octane Jason Bourne-esque, you start every issue at high speed and you do not slow down kind of storytelling. We want to give you a lot of comic in your comic while still finding that emotional core to it. So the Thunderbolts is probably going to make you cry a little less, but it will make you shout, hell yeah, ideally multiple times every issue.
I think you'll be
Excellent.
surprised how easily I cry, Colin.
Bless you.
I
Bless
take
you.
that as a
Yeah.
challenge.
Yes.
So.
And you'd be surprised how many times I say hell yeah every time I see him cry.
That right there is a healthy relationship.
Yeah, right.
Every
Yes.
time Jack cries, I'm so happy.
Yeah, I know. The secret
All right.
door.
I'm going to put a pause. I'm going to edit this part out. Did I hear you right, Jackson? Did you say that there's only 4 more issues?
There's only 3 more issues. Thunderbolts is a miniseries.
I thought it was an ongoing. Oh, okay.
So
All right.
no, and you don't need to cut this out. This is actually, I think this is really important to talk about because I don't think it was super clear. But it's how Marvel works now. And it's not, I'm not saying this is a complaint. This is just the ecosystem as it's operating right now. Is that when you are working on these books, you are making a certain number of issues that they have already done the math on and know that they can sell and know that are going to work and that they feel comfortable taking to market. Their sales department has done a whole lot of math on that to figure that out. And every book starts that way. There is no such thing as an ongoing book. Like there really aren't. There are certain ones that have the indication of ongoing because maybe your book is selling very, very well. So of course you're ongoing, or you are a flagship title that they want to make sure they keep continuing going on the regular, like X-Men or Avengers or something like that. But other series, most smaller series right now have to justify themselves through sales before they get an ongoing series, because an ongoing is an open-ended promise by the company that financially can't necessarily support that anymore. And so I think that's, I don't know, these decisions happen way above our pay grade. So all I try to do is look at it and say, what's the order and what can we write for the order? So here's the thing about Thunderbolts. Is Thunderbolts ongoing series? No, but it could be in a heartbeat. If they really like how issue 1 sells, if they really like how issue 2 sells, and they come back and they say, hey, let's keep this going. Great. We know exactly what happens. Probably the ending of issue 4 changes a little bit. We have a swap in scene so that we have our frame out into the next arc. But as it stands right now, we were told, hey, you should just think of this as a mini. We think we're going to do 4, and then maybe we'll get more down the line. But that may not happen right away. We don't know.
And I think,
that was before we got sales numbers. That was just because of the way that the industry is trending and the way that Marvel's making decisions and the way everybody's making decisions right now. So it sounds like mitigating, I guess, but I really do mean it. Like, we're very happy for the comic we get to tell, and the clarity of knowing, hey, you get 4 issues. Great. We'll make 4 great issues, and we'll really try to make those worth the reader's time.
And I think that's the key also. Like, I think readers are all, every time you see an ongoing that gets canceled as a reader and you're enjoying it, you get incredibly frustrated, right? You're like, I was just falling in love with this. How dare they cancel it? And that feels shitty for everyone involved. So the opportunity to be able to come in and know how much story we're telling and to really tune it so that we can give the reader the actual experience that we are intending on, I think is just overall going to feel so much better than suddenly having the rug pulled out from under you. So I am honestly pretty happy that we know what this is going to be. And I think the cool thing is, as the market, now we're talking markets, right? Like, well, whatever. As the market kind of grows and evolves into whatever this next 2024 is going to start to bring for it, I think what we might start seeing is like, maybe this won't be, maybe this isn't an ongoing, but the opportunity for another 4-issue miniseries, very high. I think they can greenlight 4-issue miniseries in a way that they could never greenlight an ongoing. So hopefully what we're going to start seeing is more bespoke, punchier kind of mini movies rather than kind of ongoing TV shows that are supposed to run for 7 years, right? So hopefully we'll see that kind of flex. I have a lot of hope for the model as it evolves. But perhaps messaging could be a little better on their end.
I think that there's room for both. I hope there's room for both, and I hope that both can continue to do their work. I think both have their reasons for being. I'm not sure Thunderbolts needs to be ongoing. We'll see. This story, especially and we always pitched it as a 4-issue. We never came in and said, okay, here's our Thunderbolts ongoing, and they said, oh, no, you only get 4 issues. No, we came in with a thing called Thunderbolts World Strike, which is sort of the subtitle of the whole book. And World Strike is a single op against the Red Skull told in 4 parts.
So you have in mind already a beginning, middle, and end.
Yep.
Boom.
Yep.
Got it. Okay. Well, that and there you go. That'll be very satisfying to the readers.
I was just curious because, you don't see a lot. Of course, we've seen Cap and the Howling Commandos, that miniseries recently. We just recently, reviewed this teen, awesome book, right? So we do see Nazis in books, but we don't see a lot of modern titles in contemporary times with Nazis. And so, I wanted to ask you, if that was like a conscious, other than its association with the Red Skull. I mean, Red Skull could just as easily have his own organization without Nazi symbology. And so I wondered, it's 80 years after World War II, young readers, is it culturally relevant to them? Was there a specific reason to go all in with absolute, those are Nazis, in modern times, Nazis?
I think there's 2 answers to this question that are simultaneous, and they're both true. On the one side, I think we were being honest to the Marvel Universe. Yeah, we could give Red Skull his own organization, but the Red Skull is a Nazi. Every time that he has been effective as a villain is because they have shown the evil that exists inside of him. He is one of the few Marvel villains of all of these terrible people that exist. He's one of the few who actually relishes genocide. He's just a bad person with extremely terrible politics. And it really does feel like that's iconic to him. So in doing Red Skull, it felt important not to pull that punch and to be no, he's an echo of this particular political movement that is a stain on our species and is a thing that we continue to struggle with today. So yes, I think it's still relevant. Yes, I think kids still have to deal with Nazis. Certainly they have to deal with right wingers in their like hardcore right wing fascists in their daily lives. Like it is a part of the American cultural conversation now in a way that it's hard to imagine it have been, 30, 40 years ago. They've even 10 years ago. There's been a sense that you are able to unmask as a white supremacist now in this country, that felt like the Red Skull is just such a symbol of that, a symbol of that unabashed delight in hatred. And I just, it's one of the only things I hate. So it was like, we can't turn our back on that. We can't not do that. So I think simultaneously it's like, just be honest to the character. That's how you had to write it. And on the flip side of it, we relished the opportunity to do an action book where we didn't pull as many punches as we possibly could. And the people that we would be least likely to pull our punches against are Nazis. So Collin and I write the most unabashed action. I have a bat of pure Neganite. You have what? Super pure blood. I showed you mine. Now you show me yours.
Yeah, that was good.
You can't write that for anybody except for Nazis.
That was an awesome line.
Like they give you they are so specifically sure of themselves, and they are so specifically on the wrong side of history, and almost like defiantly so, that I feel like it felt right. And it let us embrace Sharon in the book, which was a huge priority for us as well, because we are now in love with writing her. She's really, really fun. And it felt like a great opportunity to be like, this is why she got into this. She got into this to bust up fascists for the memory of this legacy. So let's play it, and let's let her do it, and let's see her at the top of her power.
What I will say though is, even as we were writing the script, we got to a page where it's like, and the swastika hangs from the wall, and we stopped and be like, fucking really? Yeah. Like, obviously as artists, you have a choice of what you present, right? If you're writing a fantasy series, it doesn't need to have racism in it, right? If you put racism in your fantasy series, that's your choice, not an assumption of the genre. So we had to be like, well, do we need this? And is it even something we kind of want to platform? Because it honestly felt strange. And we talked with, we talked with editorial and art, and we kind of went back and forth on this. And
Geraldo brought it up straight out of the script. He was like, I'm actually surprised how much Nazi symbology is in this, given what you're doing. And I was like, is that a problem for you? He was like, no, I wish we didn't still have to do this, is all. And I was like, I agree.
And that was the conversation. It was like, does this feel weird? By just the fact that we see it so little? Like, yes. And because we see it so little was almost the exact reason we needed to put it in there. You got to shine on a light on it so that you can burn it down.
Yeah.
That's an excellent point.
Hide in the dark.
Now, to be fair, that's also, I want to be clear, a flavor of issue 1. Yes. Every issue of Thunderbolts is designed as its own experience. So Thunderbolts #1 is assassination at Castle Red Skull with Destroyer and Red Guardian and Val and Bucky. Val and Bucky are always in it. Issue 2 is a heist. It's like an Ocean's 11 style heist at the Hellfire Gala against Kingpin with Black and White Widow and Val and Bucky.
Okay.
Can't wait for that.
Yeah.
Incredible. It's so cool.
Issue 3 is like a John Woo movie in Hong Kong with U.S. Agent and Shang-Chi and American Kaiju. And that's going to be insane. That one is being drawn now, and I think it's my favorite issue. It's so cool. It's such a trip. And then issue 4, I don't want to spoil yet, but Secrets. Yeah, there's a cover out there if you want to know who they're fighting in for. But each of them have a different set of characters that Bucky is bringing in as these bespoke teams. So it also lets us turn up the gas on each character. So it's like, oh, is Sharon we're gonna get more out of Sharon if she's fighting Nazis. She's in the Nazi issue. We're maybe gonna get more out of Black and White Widow in a heist than we are in a different scenario. So let's really lean into them. We're gonna get more out of U.S. Agent, especially in this particular sequence in Hong Kong. He's going to be really key to what we're doing. How do we make sure that he feels supported and serviced, and that's how Shang-Chi ends up in that story. And like it's a lot of
Yeah, because John Walker in Hong Kong sounds natural.
Totally normal place for him to be.
yeah.
I've been there many times, Rick, and Johnny Walker is very popular there.
You know what? Nothing says American interventionalism like U.S. agent in Hong Kong.
Right.
But I will say, just circling around to the Nazis of it all. Woof! What a sentence. It was also really interesting in our second issue when we do go to this fancy party, which is, as we've said, this is all a story. It's all connected to the Red Skull in some ways. We got to do a really interesting thing where it was have a lot of the characters who are in Kingpin's orbit comment on things like, we may be bad guys, but we're not fucking Nazis, right? Which is important. Like his politics, his totalitarianism, chef kiss, absolutely peak. His politics, reprehensible.
Yeah.
And that's a really important thing to kind of, it's the Kingpin can appreciate the Red Skull's money while saying that his eugenics policies were absolute hot trash. Which is just
Didn't the Joker do that in the Batman Captain America
That's right,
one shot
yeah.
by John Byrne?
Yep.
Right. And he says, I'm not a Nazi.
Literally, Joker literally manages to like one up the Red Skull, which is fantastic.
Well, I have to get back to what you were saying about the fact that you did choose to have the swastika.
Yeah.
Right. And even Geraldo had said, whoa, because decades of the Red Skull, the swastika was taken out.
Mhm.
And so I have some recent examples. So I was really fortunate to get, you remember Marvel official handbook of the Marvel Universe, right? Again, I'm a big Mike Zeck fan. So I was able to get his Red Skull that he did.
Yeah.
Now, if you notice, he's got a swastika here. When they published it in the official handbook of the Marvel Universe, it wasn't there.
Yep.
Same thing with I was able to get this Joe Quesada had done this version, and they end up doing Fear Itself. This ended up being on the cover of Fear Itself, and they took out all of this Nazi stuff and they made it into Hydra.
Yep.
And so I'm surprised, based on the history there, that they were able to like, oh yeah, you want a swastika, you want Nazis, sure, go for it.
It was never even a question. Genuinely.
Yeah. And genuinely, we're surprised as you were.
Yep. I think the only place where it was a conversation was with Geraldo, and and Alana said the same thing we did, which was like, it's important not to hide from this. We all feel like it's important not to hide from this. In the same way that I think Joe Quesada and John Byrne believe it's important not to hide from this. Like I don't think, I'm not going to pass judgment on whoever's cutting it out of the stories. I also understand the counter argument. I really do, of not constantly subjecting your readership to swastikas. I actually fully agree with that. We're only doing it for one issue.
Yeah. If it was more than one, that's a great point, Jack. If this was more than one issue, if this entire thing was, they go back in time and they're a Nazi, or not even back in time, right? We're slathering this thing with Nazi symbolism. Like, fuck no, man. Like,
It's actually what the very first version of this was. That the very first conversation we had about World Strike were that. And then we had to step back and we were like, are we just filling this book with Nazis? Can we back this off a little bit? And it turned into a more sophisticated book, I think, as a result. Because yeah, man, I feel similarly. Like, we wouldn't have wanted to do that.
The symbol is stomach turning. And it only exists, it only functions because we see it one or two times and then we burn it the fuck down.
Yeah. That splash, that silent splash at the end of the book is doing a lot of work for that, but it's there for a reason. It's the only splash like that in the book.
This is where all of the characters are walking away from the exploding building, behind them. Oh yeah, it's classic.
It is. It's a classic supervillain thing, but also you can like specifically see it's Nazi shit that's on fire.
Yeah. All right. So we actually last issue we covered Thunderbolts #1 panel by panel.
Wow.
And we did that, and we only do the first issue because we want to give people a teaser. So like, hey, you want more? Go pick it up at your local comic book shop. So if you haven't read it yet, there's a slight spoiler ahead. There's a big revelation about Valentina Allegra de Fontaine in this issue. In fact, it catches Bucky and Sharon by surprise, where even Bucky admits he didn't know.
Yeah, since first appearing in Strange Tales 159 back in 1967, Val has been involved in some of the most entertaining story arcs, right? She's been Madame Hydra, at least impersonating her for a while, leading the Leviathan army. She was Director of S.H.I.E.L.D. for a while. And then we saw her turn herself in, I think it was Secret Warriors number 27. And she ended up getting jailed in some gulag, presumably in Russia. And Nick Fury in issue 28 was on his way to rescue her. And then we hear something entirely different in issue 1. And so I gotta think, wow, that was unforeseen. And she's one of my favorite, if not my favorite comic book babe. And you turned her into a robot.
We made a robot out of her, which is different than turning her into a robot.
Oh,
For the pure fact that her body is still out there, and while we say that she died in a Russian gulag, I think it's important to recognize that that information is coming from the source that is an LMD wearing her face, who's currently involved in a very clandestine assassination attempt, right? I do think it's important to recognize that whatever we know about the Contessa Valentina Allegra de Fontaine, we only know what she wants us to know or what has been compartmentalized for us to know.
Yeah.
how Nick Fury.
So we'll see about that, or Nick Fury, right? So we'll see how that plays out. We aren't trying to take Val off the table permanently. What we want to do is make a little room to use this version we want to play with. We sort of had an idea for a Val that didn't have to reckon with as much of the villainous past, so that we could throw her into something a little more fun and a little more that had a little bit more life to it, because I just think that character is weighted down by a lot of that. And we thought that'd be really dishonest to do with the character as she exists. So instead, let's create this new version of her who's reflective of like her having gone to ground, and then we'll see what comes out of that character. We'll see if there's room for Val somewhere. Because
what we can say though is, like, hopefully that question then becomes, in which of those stories is she herself, and in which is she an LMD?
Oh, well, you succeeded. You got our interest. You got our attention, and definitely want to learn more.
There were some tears involved.
And also,
Again,
I hope you hydrate, my guy. You seem to have a going on. But I mean, also, in all behind the scenes, like, her backstory is kind of bug nuts cuckoo. She's been used in a lot of places without much care or concern for where she's been or where she's going. So that's kind of also our service of like, well, she is far more complicated. She knows that backstory, some of it doesn't track and some of it doesn't make sense. And now the question is, how much of a shell game is she playing? And where else might she be, and who else might she be? So we love the character. We are excited to perhaps play more with her. And like all things with us, once we make a toy, we love to return to the toy. So, we'll see what's on the next horizon.
We do have a few extra questions from many of our listeners. So the first one is from Ash Barnes. She asked, there you go. Ash is a big fan. Which character on the team were you most looking forward to getting to write, and why?
and she wants you to mention Bucky Barnes.
Of course.
Look, to be clear, always Bucky. I was really excited to write John Walker. I've always wanted to write John Walker. He's such a unique flavor for the Marvel Universe. You don't have a lot of guys like him, but he represents a lot of guys I've known. And a lot of just like simultaneous thuggery and bravery. And I think that barrier between the two is so interesting, because it's also the barrier of being a good and bad person. And so I think John's like on that blade edge more than almost any other hero. I really like that about him. So yeah, I played him in a live tabletop role-playing game during the pandemic. If anybody seeks out, there was a Marvel Universe one shot. We did like 4 of them, where I played US Agent, and I played him like as kind of as like comedic as I could. So I felt like getting a chance to write him and not taking the piss out of him the whole time, but rather really treating the character seriously would also be nice, and would be my apology to John for that. So I was excited.
And it should be said, though, I was making, a goof earlier of like, this high octane, no tears involved. John Walker might make you cry. We've got a beat in issue 3 that is kind of beautiful and comes out of left field. And it's like, even not that John is a meathead, but like, even the most meat-headed of us can find a moment of beauty and genuine human connection. And I think that is one of the keys of, especially when in order to understand people who might have that much more bullish perspective than you, at their core, we are all humans. We are all looking for emotional connection with people who care about us. And it's really easy to forget that, especially in superhero comics. But finding that human moment for John, even when connected to such a monster as American Kaiju, was really beautiful. My answer, and this surprised me, Natasha. Obviously, we've read Natasha before, but this time it has the added juice, which we did not expect going in, of her having the symbiote. They reached out to us after we'd already written the issue, actually, and said, hey, by the way, Natasha Romanoff is currently in possession of the Venom suit, or a Venom. Do you want to use that? You don't have to, but if you'd like to. And we kind of saw the design and said, hell yeah, man. And it gives her an absolute a different flavor than we saw from her in, say, in Sentinel and in Cold War. It lets her be a little different. It gives her a little bit more of an edge. It gives her this cool new power set. And it was just a real delight to be able to kind of bring her to life. I loved writing her.
And her dichotomy between her and White Widow is like enhanced so much more now, that their skill sets and approaches are so different because of the suit. It's been really nice to see.
Very cool. All right. I have to go back to your playing John Walker on the tabletop. All right, Jackson, let's hear the Southern drawl.
No, I'm not. I can't. I didn't even do it in the game. I did like, I don't do accents. I think I did like, I don't know. I think I did them down here. I think I just kind of talked like I imagine Sam. Oh, what's the cowboy actor?
Sam Elliott.
Oh, Sam Elliott. Yeah. Well, you're rocking the
I
stash.
kind of do Sam Elliott. Yeah, the stash. But that was but yeah, it was mostly I was mostly just making stupid jokes. It was not a good time. I mean, it was a great time, but it was like not a good time for John. I felt bad about that.
I'm waiting for Bob to mention talking about guys who can't do accents. You should hear Rick.
Rick does an amazing British woman.
Oh. I see what I'm getting to do at a Comic-Con.
we're moving along. All right. Patron Andrew Meyer asks, the comic medium definitely has allowed the subject matter a greater canvas to work with rather than the confines of mainstream video and productions. And this kind of gets back, I think, Collin, to what you had said originally about, when you were, studying to be, in film and so on. It definitely allows the writers the ability to take characters and teams to different places in a manner not given in cinema. That said, do you feel that the Thunderbolts is allowing you as writers to portray the feelings that reflect the modern times, the need for results, answers, retribution, without the confines of law and gentleness that can be perceived as being stifled in modern day society? And then he goes on to say, people want to see justice and order, but they are disheartened with the way things are today. And without a cap to rise above and show them the light, they tend to fall to anti-heroes.
So that is a really astute reading. I'm not a big fan of commenting on our absolute intention in things, because I don't think we always have, truthfully, intention. I think we have instinct and reason, and we've spoken about it a lot, and we found a thing that feels emotionally true. But even then, I think if you break it down, Collin might have different objectives than I do. We might have slightly different like personal objectives or ways that we're bringing in the story. That's just because you're naturally a writer. So like, I don't want to say, oh, well, we're writing this about this particular kind of thing, or trying to take the modern politic and describe it inside of a. I don't do that. What I will say is, I think that's very, very astute. And I think, moreover, the idea that the strength of Bucky Barnes is that he doesn't wait for permission from his conscience. His conscience gives him fucking full bore permission to stand up for what's right, where Steve kind of agonizes about that a lot more. Bucky doesn't. And what that required, that's made him a great sidekick to that character, but it's also now given him this really excellent ability to step into the world and demand results himself, to be the person who says, hey, we need to do something. We need to actually stop this. Like, I don't know, as Jackson Lanzing, right? I don't know if Marvel will keep the Red Skull off the table when we are done. But I can tell you that we are as writers and as storytellers, like Bucky, trying to take him out for good. Like, I don't want this character around anymore. Not because he's a bad character, but because he is representative of a philosophy that we need to bag and throw away forever. And I think Bucky is able to look at that and say, all right, time for results. Time to stop having this conversation. Nazis are bad. I've decided. Let's move on to the results phase. And I do think that is what he's doing. Is that a big political statement? I don't want to talk about that. Is it absolutely true to the character? Absolutely. To me.
He's the only one who can deliver justice. Like lightning.
Oh, you did it. You dog.
They should make that a catchphrase.
That was pretty good.
That's nice.
All right, Daddy Marvel about it.
Yeah, very nice. It's how long will they keep Red Skull off the table? It's a great question. I mean, like J.M. DeMatteis, killed the Red Skull in issue 300 of Captain America. It took 350 before Mark Grunwald, revealed that he was back. That's a long time in the comic world, right? So, who's to say?
Who's to say?
Hopefully they keep him off the table for a long time.
So Brent Beisel asks, first of all, I want to thank Jackson and Collin for the run on Captain America, Sentinel of Liberty. I really enjoyed the run and was sad to see it end so abruptly, but I'm excited to see them pick up some of those threads in the new Thunderbolts series. Some of my favorite Captain America stories are the ones that don't include Steve Rogers. I know that sounds crazy, but I've often found that the character and legend of Steve Rogers grows the largest in his absence when his friends and successors discuss and compare themselves to Steve. With so many Cap-related characters in Thunderbolts, can we expect some of the same here?
I think it literally happens in issue 1. That one, I defer you to page. I think it's like page 8, panel 2, page 9, panel 2, somewhere around there, where Bucky is like, did you tell Steve about this? And Sharon's like, I did not tell Steve about this. And that we have a little point with these two, as they both say, like, yeah, we're about to go take out Steve's longest nemesis. Neither of us could bear to tell him, because he would try to stop us, and we don't want to deal with that.
Yeah.
I think Thunderbolts, by its very nature, says right up front, Steve shouldn't know. It's better if Steve doesn't know. And is that true? I don't know. That's Bucky's framework. That's what Bucky believes. Is that true from a larger perspective? Probably not. Probably if he finds out down the line some way, maybe, again, who knows what happens in story. I don't know what power we're going to have and what we're going to be able to do as we go down the line. I know that in a perfect world, I would love to see this stuff ripple and continue to build out that relationship, because Steve's absence in Thunderbolts, while not a thing that we comment on often, is something that we comment on directly in one. For sure.
I think it's just like all of us. It's very easy to be a good person when the best person is in the room with you. The question becomes, can you maintain that ideology? Can you maintain those ethics even when they've left the room? And I think that is, to Brett's point, a great observation. Steve Rogers is about inspiring the people around him, but he's not there to be the den mother. You need to be able to take that drive and take those learnings into your own life, even when he's not looking over your shoulder.
What is this? Our farewell letter from Sentinel of Liberty finale?
It bears
Lord, oh, we
revisiting.
are lucky.
Why not?
I listen, I'm taking away from this. I have never, ever heard Captain America referred to as a den mother before. So that's my takeaway.
Not a dead mother. Let's be clear, not a dead mother.
Okay. All right, guys. So besides Thunderbolts, what else is keeping you busy in 2024? I know you have Outsiders for DC. Are there any projects coming up that you could share with the listeners?
Sure, yeah. So Timeless is coming from Marvel on Christmas Day or thereabouts. It is our Christmas present to you, the Marvel readership. It is a big, crazy science fiction fight throwdown between the last two standing heroes at the end of time in the Marvel universe. It is a new, weird future with two very strange new characters, a new reimagining of Power Man and a new reimagining of Moon Knight. Standing against each other at the end of all things. It is also a preview at the next year of Marvel Comics. So there are some teases as to what's coming in Thunderbolts, as well as in a lot of other books, Captain America, I believe, and Mortal Thor, and on and on and on. So lots of cool stuff there, and hopefully the beginning of something that we're going to be able to play with a little bit more in the Marvel universe. Stay tuned. So that's the big one, and then at least at Marvel, Guardians of the Galaxy, we are bringing to a close right now. Out to the annual, which is sort of our unofficial issue 11 that is ending that series. And that is another one of these, like, we knew we were going to get a short run, and we really like built it around an ending. We broke all the toys in the first half so that we could put them back together in the second. And we're in the middle of what Bleeding Cool has started affectionately referring to as our family therapy every session, every issue version of Guardians of the Galaxy, but they're right, it is, and that rocks. So get off us.
As you mentioned, we've got Outsiders over at DC. This is just like Thunderbolts. This is a brand new take on the Outsiders. It doesn't have any of the DNA of what you might be expecting. It is new adventures of Kate Kane and Luke Fox and their new ally, a strange woman named Drummer, as the three of them take on the archaeology and the forgotten corners of the DC universe, specifically at the kind of corners of reality. It is they've been clear about it. It is a 12-issue maxi series. It is easily the wildest and let's call it most Grant Morrison-y of all the books that we've done. I'd say it has a real look at the nature of stories within stories themselves. I'm fucking super proud of it. People should strap in if they want to check that out.
Outsiders is going to be the craziest thing we've done in a long time. I'm so proud of this book. Can't wait for people to see it.
Of course, we have our ongoing Star Trek series. I know our DC Marvel fans don't necessarily cross over with our Star Trek fans, but we are going strong over at IDW's Star Trek line. Continues to be some of the best Star Trek I think we have ever imagined checking out, and it's incredible that we're the ones making it.
Another surreal moment.
Oh my God, that's a whole different conversation, my guys. And we recently were going to be having our first in a long time a creator-owned book, Whiff Wolf, which will be coming out later or at the beginning of next year.
April of next year. Whiff Wolf
will be a beautiful
April of 24.
April of 24. Yeah.
Okay. So okay.
It was supposed to be out a little bit earlier, but production post-COVID has just been such a nightmare.
How do you spell that?
It'll be out in April. WIFWULF. With Wolf.
What's it about?
It's a short form story that we put together with this incredible young artist named Dalen Ogden. It is the story of a young woman, Charity, who is in a post-Civil War kind of America, who gets betrothed to a young man, the kind of golden boy of the village. And as things kind of devolve, we start to explore the idea of what is the difference between a person of the town and a wolf of the forest, as she kind of starts to engage in the kind of more Lupin aspects and freedom that we find within the woods. It's really a story about freedom. It's a story about pain. It's a story about abuse in a lot of ways. It's really heavy and it's really beautiful, and we really know that it will find its right audience to folks who are a little bit more looking for the kind of more a modern fairy tale, if you will.
It's the closest thing we've done to the Vertigo books that inspired us a lot growing up. I think it has a lot of sort of Neil Gaiman DNA in that regard. But it's also very singular, I think, because it comes from Dalen's pen. Dalen is an incredible artist. They're really they've grown a pretty solid fan base over print art, not a lot of like sequentials. But this is something they've wanted to do for a really long time. And when they came to us with it, it was with the idea that they wanted to talk about abuse that they'd been through in their life and find ways to express it and understand it through the art. And they challenged us to write that story, which I thought was a really interesting way to do things, because in a lot of ways it was like our artist was also our editor, and was able to help like guide the project and get it where it needed to go. So Dalen, it's really a showcase for Dalen. We're kind of there as like, I don't know. It's like I often refer to us as like a band. I think this is one of the few times we've come in and been like a backing band. Like we're there, we're the band, but we have a special guest star lead singer.
Yeah, it's Dalen Ogden and the Hive Mind.
It's Dalen Ogden and the Hive Mind, exactly.
But coming from us directly is our first true creator-owned series coming early next year.
Can't talk about it.
You can't talk about it? It's not announced?
It's not announced. We can't talk about it.
Well, how do people find out more information? Is it still the best way to follow you on Twitter for both of you guys, or is there a better place?
We can be found at, unfortunately, still at Twitter, at Jackson Lanzing on Twitter. It's an easy way to find me, or on Instagram at Found in the Wild. I admit this de-evolution of social media has really left us out in the cold. I feel like we should have like a newsletter or something, but we're too busy writing comics. We're too busy writing. We can't write more.
Sounds good. Well, listen, Collin, Jackson, thanks so much for joining the show. It was a pleasure having you guys back on again, and we're excited for what's coming next with our favorite characters in the pages of the Thunderbolts, and enjoy as always your writing and inspiration.
No, thank you very much. Really appreciate that.
Thanks,
This
guys.
has been a pleasure. We always love it.
And thank you very much to your fans who both support you and support us. So
They do.
Shields up, everybody. Shields up.
Excellent. Well, Bob, that was another fun conversation with Jackson and Collin. The Hive Mind. Those guys they got a lot of energy. They know how to bring it.
They really do. They're just entertaining as all get out. And but also like just thinkers, man. I just love the way they think. And clearly their reverence for the material, for the art, for the genre, it really comes through. So always a treat to talk to those two.
Yeah. What was it about what really stood out to the most to you, Bob?
Well, I just love the way that they wanted to plumb the history of, the Thunderbolts, right? I mean, it was amazing to me. Of course they brought the new Destroyer over from, their previous series, right? But
right. Yeah.
Bringing Shotgun back as the Red Guardian. And although I got to tell you, a bit of me is like, you can clearly see the parallels between what's coming forth in MCU. Just in the way that they've illustrated that character, and the way it's portrayed in the movies.
Well, we'll see if they come back for a fourth time.
Yeah.
we'll see if we can get them on that SNL hierarchy and be number one at some point. So, but anyway, coming up next episode, Bob, I'm excited because we are kicking off our new long tail story. Meaning we're going to do one issue per episode, and we're going to do it the second Wednesday of every month for the next 6 months, because we're going, as the fans have voted, of all the stories that we should cover, this one got the most votes, and that is from 1990, Streets of Poison.
Yep, sure did. Now, were you shocked at those results?
No, not really.
Yeah, I wasn't even.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, we kind of called it, but it's nice to know that this is what the listeners want. So,
yeah, of course.
Streets of Poison Part 1, Captain America 372. Come back next episode 170, and we will cover that panel by panel.
Indeed.
Well, Bob, as always, it's been so much fun wrapping cap with you.
Indeed. I can't wait to do this again next week.
All right. He's Bob Lucius. I'm Rick Verbanis, and you need to go do a rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen on any podcast, as we really do appreciate that. And thanks for listening to the Captain America Comic Book Fans Podcast.